Some breaking news this hour to kick off tonight's show. President Donald Trump sent US officials to the UK on a fact-finding mission after becoming so concerned with the erosion of free speech in Britain. A team from the US State Department spent days in the country and interviewed pro-life campaigners to feed back to the White House. The five-person team met with five activists who had been arrested in the UK for silently protesting outside abortion clinics across Britain. The visit in March is the latest sign of the Trump administration's willingness to intervene in domestic British affairs. Of course, it was only yesterday that the president voiced concern on social media about Britain's march towards net zero. Well, I'm afraid to admit the ugly truth tonight that there is no such thing as free speech in the UK. Politicians can talk all they want about protecting freedom of expression, but the truth is they're lying. Whether they're lying through ignorance or something more sinister, they're lying nonetheless, because free speech does not exist if there are consequences to it. That kind of environment stifles creative thought out of fear of being cancelled or, worse, as we've seen in this country, imprisoned. And the visit of American Conservative star Charlie Kirk to England this week reminded me of this. I spoke to him about Lucy Connolly, who we all know now as the mother and childminder who was banged up by the state for a solitary tweet during the Southport massacre that saw her given a 2.5-year sentence. As a reminder, this is what Charlie Kirk said about Lucy's situation.
Try to get the US State Department involved. I don't know if you know what their bandwidth is here, but I'm sorry, again, I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a U.S. government. I just want to be very clear. Is this a way that a liberal democracy and an ally of the United States acts? Just to be clear, what she said would not be any prison time in America. I don't like what she said, but she showed contrition.
Well, Charlie returned home to the US a few days ago, and he talked about his GB News interview with me on his show. His analysis was sobering.
The UK culturally felt like America before Donald Trump went down the golden escalator. They're in the abyss, but culturally, there is this kind of silent, are we allowed to say this? Are we allowed to challenge this? Are we allowed to talk about this? Are we allowed to question this?
Well, it's not just Lucy Connolly, is it? Dozens of British people every day are being arrested by Stasi police forces for thought crimes in Britain. One of the most prominent recent examples was that of retired Special Constable Julian Fawkes, who was handcuffed at his home by Kent Police after he replied to pro-Palestinian activists on X. He was interrogated and given a caution, but not before officers ransacked his home and commented on his, quote, Brexity books.
In cuffs. The rest of the officers all piled in past me. And for the next hour and a half, I sat with one of the officers while his colleagues, the other five, basically went through every room, every drawer, wardrobe, cupboard in my house. They were in the loft, they were in the garage, they were in the garden shed.
Well, then we have the 18-year-old footballer, Keir Vaughan, who was banned from the game for asking a trans opponent, and Keir is a young lady, by the way, for asking a trans opponent, a biological man who was cheating by opting to play against women, if he was indeed a man. And what about Matthew Toomer, the gay railway station volunteer thrown out of West Midlands Railway's Adopt a Station scheme when he privately contacted bosses about a Progress Pride train? Or the Waitrose wine specialist, Ben Woods, who was sacked by the supermarket in March because of his posts on X under an anonymous account. He was doxxed. He'd been working for Waitrose for 25 years before they threw him under the bus. The truth is, there have been countless times on this channel and on this show where I've had to hold back from saying something I want to say or alter my delivery because of the consequences of what I really want to say about the direction of travel in this country. It would, quite frankly, get me in hot water. That is not free speech. And it's not the fault of GB News, by the way, either. They are operating in an environment where far-left campaign groups have been doing everything in their power to shut the channel down. And they want to shut the channel down because, like in George Orwell's 1984, whoever's funding these communist groups want you to reject the evidence of your eyes and your ears. They want the everyday man, you and me, the everyday woman of this country, feeling like a pariah for disagreeing with the most basic and fundamental of issues affecting this country, such as immigration. They don't like it when people like me, by most measures a normal thinking person, call out mentally ill cults or child abusers or government-sponsored psyops. They did it during COVID, making people feel like they were the odd one out for being concerned about vaccines or standing 6 feet from each other without scientific evidence. Now they do it with every other topic you can think of. So I say tonight, Charlie Kirk is right. Britain gave free speech to the world, but now we live in a tyrannical police state run by tin pot dictators. I don't know exactly when or how that happened, but let's start being honest with ourselves about where we are. Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, the former Met Police detective Peter Blexley, and the former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Good evening, you lovely lot.
Good evening.
Ladies first, Linda, we'll start with you. Thoughts on Charlie Kirk's comments about the UK? They are gravely concerned about free speech in Britain.
I think that things have gone a little bit too far in this country. The fact of the matter is that any well-trained journalist does know that free speech does have to exist in a certain environment where you can't be defamatory and you can't incite racial hatred or violence. We know that because we're trained to recognise it. But what's happened here in this country is we've chucked the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
What's happened now is that everyone is starting to react to fairly, not innocent phrases exactly, but we're starting to become really obsessive about things that don't actually matter and people should be allowed to speak about. Lucy Connolly's she's a case in point. If you think that the actual Prime Minister now is leading the charge, along with Shabnam Mahmood, to actually shorten jail sentences or have no jail sentences for some criminals, and yet Lucy Connolly is in prison for 31 months and loses her appeal, you've got to start asking yourself, what is going on here?
And also, can I just add, Paul Richards, Keir Starmer asked about Lucy Connolly. He says, sorry, I'm not across the case. Come on, pull the other leg. By the way, I don't want to just talk about Lucy Connolly. This is free speech in Britain. Free speech, in my book, does not exist in Britain.
Well, technically you're right, of course, because we can't just say whatever we like. We can't walk into a crowded theatre and shout fire, right? And I can't say so-and-so's a paedophile or so-and-so's a terrorist without, there being some evidence for that. We can't just say whatever we like anywhere we like. We have boundaries and rules. And I would say to the Americans coming over and lecturing us on how to run the place, they display total ignorance of our system so often. If you vox pop American citizens, they don't know where England is. They think our Prime Minister is King Charles. They think Africa's a country.
They're stupid.
Yeah, a lot of them are very poorly educated about the world.
It's a country of 300 plus million people, Paul.
So why are they coming here telling us what to do? And you said they're intervening. They're not intervening, Ben. They're interfering, and they need to butt out.
OK, Peter Blexley.
Let's talk about some of the rules that Paul's just brought up, OK? Namely, the Malicious Communications Act of 1988, under which British police are currently arresting about 30 people a day for posts on social media and the such like. Now, that piece of legislation came into being to largely deal with poison pen letters. Yeah. Now, there's an old expression, which three of us are certainly familiar with.
No, I'm familiar as well.
Yeah, of course you are.
Somebody, just as a quick one, somebody wrote a poison pen letter to my mother and said, world's best kept garden. The garden was a bit scruffy, but yeah, there's just a small example. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. And that's what that legislation was largely enacted to tackle with. But our police are using this now to scoop up dozens of people on a daily basis for things that they may have written online. Of course, it is not a free-for-all, whether it be online, in the streets or in the pub.
Or in television. In television as well.
Yes, we do not have a free-for-all, but this legislation is clearly no longer fit for purpose. And what is really happening is that the police are pandering to people who get offended by stuff which really should be allowed under free speech in this country. I posted a joke a few days ago, a very funny joke, and it offended numerous snowflakes who then campaigned roundly to try and get me cancelled, the length and breadth of any media organisation I've ever been on, OK? Yeah. This is tyrannical mob rule by a minority of snowflakes who are so delicate that they get offended by people who tell jokes or tell it how it is.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk was saying that the UK needs to get its mojo back. And, of course, we've just heard this breaking news tonight. Donald Trump has sent 5 State Department officials to the UK to do a briefing on the erosion of free speech. And, Paul, I know you're saying they shouldn't interfere, but they are coming from, I'll say this, they're coming from a place of concern as our dearest friends, as our allies, as Charlie Kirk says, Britain has a lot to be proud of. We gave free speech to the world, and now we're heading down a very dark path indeed.
It came up when Starmer was in the White House, didn't it? If you remember, J.D. Vance said something about free speech, and Starmer stood up to him and said, no, we are the home of free speech, and we should be proud of that. So when these sceptics come in over here telling us what to do, I think they should be told to...
Yeah, but Starmer would say that. And actually, everybody's concerns, including Charlie Kirk, are actually very well founded in terms of free speech being eroded.
No one minds that level of concern, but I think it goes back to a point Paul made. There's concern and there's interference.
Yeah.
And I think people are really, really annoyed about Americans interfering.
OK, great stuff. Thank you, panel.